players will do deeply unenjoyable things and ruin their own fun at the gaming table if it increases their character's chance of survival. I'm James, this is DM with a Day Job. Down there in the doobly-doo, you will find a link to a PDF that has bosses that I have run with my players and that I've used in this channel, and it's kind of version 2 of those bosses. So anything that I thought didn't land really well, anything that landed too hard, I've tried to fix. I also broke apart their abilities into something that was kind of standardized so that you can think of building a boss as more of a la carte thing, like building a character and picking feats or skills and going, I want this, this, and this, and there's standard damage language. So if it's a boss that you need to be level 2 as opposed to level 20, you can scale the damage down. As I add new bosses to this channel, as I list one, I will update that document so that there will always be new stuff going into there. In the 1940s, Joseph Campbell releases a book called Hero with 1,000 Faces. And if you've never heard of the book name, you still know about it because you've probably seen something like Star Wars or many of the Marvel movies or any fantasy literature from the modern era deals with this kind of hero's journey arc where at the end of the arc, there will be a climactic battle between good and evil, the antagonist against the protagonist. Okay, there are exceptions. I guess you could consider the battle at Mount Doom with Gollum to be a climactic final battle, or the Scourging of the Shire, but it doesn't really work. You're trying really hard to fit that into the mold. And there are exceptions. It's possible not to do this. Humans have used that story since Perseus and Beowulf and Gilgamesh. We use it in the modern era in things like the Prydain Chronicles and many of the Narnia books and many of the Brandon Sanderson books and Star Wars and Iron Man. Many of the Marvel movies follow that same exact arc. And we like these stories. We like stories where characters are very committed to their way. We would not like Star Wars if at the end of the original trilogy, Luke goes to save Darth Vader, where this has now become a battle for Darth Vader's soul and whether we can redeem him. And Luke shows up and says, Emperor, you're wrong about my father. I am going to save him. Oh, well, since you're committed, I'm not really all that married to this idea. So maybe I shouldn't have disbanded the Senate. I'm going to break up the Imperial Navy and I'm going to go wander off into a monastery and reflect on all the evil that I've done throughout my life. Good luck with your new republic. Dungeons & Dragons allows us to do this through legendary creatures, but there's not a lot of them available to us in the Monster Manual and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and all the other books. It's not always appropriate to whatever the campaign is that we're running either, so we're left to try to make these up ourselves, and that's tricky because it's hard to anticipate everything that the players are going to do. We need to play them as if they want to win, but we don't want the players to feel like they never had a chance. We want them to win. Just, you need to struggle for it so that you feel like this legitimately earned all the time that you put in the campaign before this.
Are you just fiddling around with me or what?
I just want you to feel you're doing well. I hate for people to die on bad.
There are a couple guidelines that I put together for myself to make sure that my encounters, if not succeed, at least don't miss any glaring holes. Number 1, types of attacks. They need to have a melee attack, a ranged attack, and some sort of AoE attack. And these can be different in values of strength, and that will kind of define what kind of fight it is. If I've got a knight, a death knight on horseback, then it's probably a very heavy single target attack, but I definitely need to have a ranged attack and an AoE attack in there. If I'm fighting a dragon, then maybe the AoE attack is the most dangerous attack, or like a lich, the AoE might be the worst, but I still need to have something that I can target as single ranged and something that I can do if I get into melee. Because if you don't, and the players detect the weakness of this boss, the players will use that and exploit it. Players will do deeply unenjoyable things and ruin their own fun at the gaming table if it increases their character's chance of survival. And one of our jobs as a dungeon master is to find ways to mitigate that, to find ways to allow players to use really cool, impactful abilities, but not so often that they ruin their own fun and they come away going, well, that fight was kind of dull and stupid. Kiting is a perfect example of this. If you're not familiar with the term, kiting is used in video games. Imagine Legolas against a troll, and imagine that that troll can move 30 feet, but Legolas can move 40 feet. So the troll moves 30 feet, Legolas moves away 40 feet, and then with his longbow that has a 60-foot range, he shoots the troll. And then he rinses and repeats. Every time the troll gets up to him, Legolas moves away and shoots the troll again. And Legolas is never really in danger. So at the end of the fight, Legolas turns to the Dungeon Master and goes, well, that was kind of, that was kind of lame. It just took a lot of time. Yeah, he could have stayed there and fought the troll, or the Dungeon Master could have patched the troll and done something different and allowed the troll to hit Legolas. And that's our jobs as Dungeon Masters, to find ways to prevent the players from ruining their own fun because they don't think of it that way. They don't think of game design in that terms. That's our job. The next thing for me is that one of these attacks, the melee, the ranged, or the AoE attack, has got to be a devastating, iconic attack, like the Dragon's Breath weapon. It needs to be something that this is what we were expecting, and it happened. We need to deliver on those expectations. Sure, they've got, fire resistance and all that kind of thing, but if they didn't see the dragon breathe fire at least once during an encounter, what's the point of using a dragon? It could have just been a chimera or a manticore or any other number of monsters, but we also need to put some sort of limit on it. If it is this gigantic, devastating ability, and we can just breathe fire, breathe fire, breathe fire, breathe fire, breathe fire, breathe fire, it's kind of the opposite problem of the kiting, where now the boss is just spamming this one ability, and this is really boring and annoying, and I feel like you're trying as a dungeon master too hard to kill us. Okay, well, some dungeon masters like that don't do that. But also it's just badly designed, and the dungeon master is now looking, going, well, the optimal thing to kill you is this, and this boss wants to win, so I guess I should do that. Don't do that. Patch your boss during the fight and go, you know what? This should have a cooldown, or this should have a save where if you save against it, you're not affected against it. Again, like many fear effects, where if you save versus the fear, you cannot be affected by this person's fear ever again, or 24 hours. But the boss is going to be dead within 24 hours, so that's kind of the same thing. There are lots of different kinds of cooldowns that we can use. You can use the breath weapon where it's recharged on a 1d6. You can use something like I like to use, if these three things happen in sequence, then I get to use this dangerous ability. Like, for example, my Gothias tree. A Gothias tree is an undead tree if you've never encountered that monster. The Gothias tree sends out ranged tendrils, roots that try to grab somebody, and then I can try to pull them under. But that requires three things. Number one, the attack has to hit. The attack hits, then the grapple has to hit. If the grapple hits, then I have to be able to actually pull you underground. But once you're underground, you're in a lot of trouble. Now, every time I squeeze you with damage, you are losing rounds and rounds of breath, and the players are having to abandon hacking up this Gothias tree and go dig you out, or make a judgment call of, well, is that Gothias tree near death? Because if we can finish it off, then it's going to stop squeezing you and your breath, and we have a lot more chances to dig you out. And if we go dig you out, we're going to be whacked in the back of the head by a giant undead whomping willow. So which of these options is what we should be doing now? And again, there isn't necessarily a right answer, and you're going to have to make some choices about how you deal with this thing, is what makes D&D fun. Third for me is something that allows my boss monster to move without provoking an opportunity attack. Well, if I move, this paladin with sentinel is going to smack me in the back of the head, and not only am I going to take damage, but the move was useless anyway, so I might as well just stay here and attack this paladin, which means that then we have the healer fairly confident that the only damage is going to be on the paladin, and the wizard, warlock, or sorcerer over there is fairly confident that they're safe and they can just bomb the monster without worrying about taking cover, getting height, using any of their spells like mirror image or shield or anything to try to prevent damage. And this is just now damage until boss is dead. So we need something that allows us to get up and move. And depending on the boss, that's going to be different. I don't want to deny them the use of Sentinel. They got the cool ability and they should get to use it. But I also need an escape mechanism that says, you know what, this time I'm going to get out. If it's something like a Lich, then Misty Step is perfect. If it's something like a demon, being able to teleport and then take an action as a legendary demon, that's also perfect. But for my melee characters, like Isaac from Curse of Strahd, that I've renamed for copyright issues, although I'm not sure that that counts anymore, I don't know. I think of Isaac as a melee combatant wielding this giant axe with devil-infused power. But if he just stands there, it's kind of boring, so I need some way to get around, and that's where I get like infernal charges and overruns and smashing people into walls, is so that I can get out of that melee situation when I go, this is going to get real boring real fast. We're just going to have a rogue and a fighter unload damage on this, and this is going to be underwhelming for a fight. Then there's hit points. On average, I want my bosses to have enough hit points to survive 5 rounds of combat. If it's the end of just a random dungeon, I want this hill giant or minotaur or goblin to survive enough rounds to leave an impression, then maybe 3 is okay. But if it's the end of a campaign arc or an end of a campaign, I'm aiming for more like 7 rounds. I want enough there so at the end of this combat, the players are running on steam. So I got nothing left. This is it. Firebolt. Oh my God, we killed it. That's the feeling that we were scraping the bottom of the barrel that I'm going for with my boss monsters. And many of the boss monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, they don't have those hit points. Take a creature like Zugtamoy from Monsters of the Multiverse. She is supposedly a challenge rating 26 creature, and she has 420 odd hit points. This is the damage that the warrior in my Curse of Strahd at level 11 did to Strahd in 1 round. The way I assign hit dice for my monsters is to look at the party, and I give them the amount of hit dice that the party has in levels. So there's 55 levels here. There's 5 players. Each one of them is a level 11. Therefore, there are 55 levels. A level is a hit dice. 55 hit dice on my legendary monster. And I can raise and lower those hit points even further by saying they rolled low on the hit dice chart or they rolled high. In Strahd's case, I maxed it out because I want to make sure that they last a long time. Yes, that ends up being a lot of hit dice, but keep in mind that their damage is scaling as well as characters level up. So while they only did 1d8 plus 1 damage before, they're now doing 2d6 plus 7 plus 2d8 for the holy weapon. Their damage is skyrocketing as well, especially once they start getting extra attacks. I guess I'm unintentionally doing a 5 ways to make your boss battle better, but that really wasn't intentional. I promise not to make this a regular thing. But there were 5 of them, I guess 6 if you count the don't at the end of this. The 5th one for me is some way to, if not guarantee success, heavily tilt the odds in favor of success. You can give your bosses things like recklessness or lucky or a lair action that says, I am in my place of power and therefore I get advantage on all my rolls. Because players are often going to focus on giving the monster disadvantage because they want to live. So we need some way to counter that to get back to regularly rolling. Why? Because again, if we never impact the players, if they never feel like they are in danger, it is anticlimactic. I had a fight against Rodin, my kind of campaign Curse of Strahd Arc 2 end villain, and he missed every single attack for 5 rounds. I could not roll above a 5. Rodin had been chasing them across Barovia for a year. I think it might have been a year and a half in real time. And all of a sudden, this was it? He never landed a hit. They crumpled him up like a potato chip bag. That is anticlimactic. It did not live up to the threat that Rodin had posed to them the entire campaign. And we can't fix the fact that dice are there. So we need some way to say, I need to tilt the odds in my favor, or at least force a success when I really need to once in a while, so that the breath weapon from the dragon goes off, so that they feel the impact. Many of the abilities, my players have seen these bosses afterwards because they're interested in them and they're dungeon masters themselves. They're like, what did you do? So I share them with them. And they go, oh, that would have been cool if that went off. Yes, it would have, because all of a sudden they would have been panicking and that would have made a very dynamic fight. But it didn't get to, because I didn't think about it until I was planning Strahd and going, no, if Strahd does the same thing Rodin did and misses with every attack, after 2.5 years of playing Curse of Strahd, that's not worthwhile. The last recommendation is a don't rather than a do. Don't take players' turns. Stun and paralysis are particularly bad at this. There are abilities that can wipe out those so that the player can get the turn back. But because of the often low save on those abilities and that you save repeatedly, priests, wizards, sorcerers, whoever will often look at that ability and go, well, you could just save another round. Do I really want to use a third or fourth or whatever level spell slot to try to get rid of something that you could just save against and come out next round? Isn't there a better use of my spell slot? So they'll just eat the stun, they'll eat the paralysis, hoping that it wears off the next round. The same isn't true of making a player unconscious or making them underground and suffocating or turning them to stone or any of those kind of abilities. They have to do something about this. They can't just hope that the dice play nicely with this player again. Players are going to use it against our creatures, and that's okay. That's why we have legendary resistances. Using it against a player feels bad because this player is waiting an hour for their turn to come around again, and if their turn involves rolling that dice to see whether they get out of the stun or the paralysis, it's not fun. It's like, okay, cool. I guess I go get pizza and I wait another hour for my turn to come back around. Okay, this is editing, James. This video has already gone on much longer than I thought it would be. So I'm going to split into two parts. This one is about the Lego bricks of how you construct a legendary monster, or at least how I do it. And the next one is going to show the completed castle. In this case, Curse of Strahd's Strahd and Casimir, one that I made up for my Curse of Strahd game, and showing how these parts all came together. If you like a longer form video, let me know. My general sense is that it's easier to separate them up into pieces, and if you want a longer video, just watch them back to back. That might just be me. For legendary monsters, I'm really looking for a way to force the players to really dig deep into what they can use, into creative solutions, into dropping chandeliers or destroying floors or something that they wouldn't have thought of, so that it feels like this is something that they have not seen before. This isn't the same thing as the 12 orcs they fought in the room before. This is the chieftain, and this is going to take more to really give them that feeling of being adventurers, of being special forces, of being superheroes in a fantasy world, and that this isn't something that just anyone could have defeated. Only they could have defeated this. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember, here at Player 2, try to have some fun.